Namaste and welcome to Who Says, connecting the dots between sexuality, Ayurveda, yoga, and spirituality. We are at Let's Talk Masturbation Part 2. Today's episode will go over a little bit of the spiritual and yogic perspectives on masturbation, sexual energy, as well as sex toys, which I call masturbation toys, for any and every gender identity and orientation that lives under the sun. So let's start with the spiritual side of things. A few weeks ago, I saw a friend who had posted about this woman who her whole job is to basically guide people into finding a way to reconnect with their sexual and genital power through masturbation. And while I think that that's a really sex positive and beautiful message, at the same time, as a sexologist, I find that that's quite a dangerous message in a way, because it does exclude the people who don't want to masturbate or have no desire to masturbate. And I'm sure that that's not what this person meant, but it can be quite othering when you see stuff like that to think, but what about my sexual power? Like, I don't want to masturbate, but I still want that. I want to, I don't like to touch myself, but I still enjoy this. Or perhaps you're asexual. It makes you feel othered, it makes you feel that something's wrong with you. And I'm just here to say, there's nothing wrong with you. I know I said this like 100 times last episode, but not desiring to masturbate for whatever reason, whether it's sexual trauma, you're asexual, or maybe it just goes against what you believe religiously, you just have no interest. It does not matter. You are healthy, whether you want to masturbate or not. I think that it's really important to know your bits and bobs, and whether you're interested in touching yourself in a sexual way, being intimate with yourself in a non-sexual setting is important. Knowing what kind of genitalia you have down there is important. You don't have to stimulate yourself to know what you look like down below. But not desiring masturbation is so healthy. It's fine. It's about choice, and with anything that is sexual, anything that involves your body, choice, consent, even if it's not involving another person, consent. You should never force yourself to do something you don't want to do. And I think that's the really beautiful thing about masturbation, is that usually people are touching themselves because they want to. So don't feel like you're weird or anything just because you don't. It does not diminish your power in any way, shape, or form. It's all energetic, and there are many routes to cultivating and nurturing that energy. Just as in yoga, there's so many pathways. There's different forms of yoga, right? But it's all yoga. There's Ashtanga, there's Vinyasa, there's Hatha, Yin, so on and so on. And while there are different ways to practice yoga, different ways to do asana, which are the postures of yoga, it's all yoga, and it all leads to the same thing. And yoga comes from the word yuj, which means unification. If anyone tells you that yoga means anything else, it's wrong. It has a definition. It means unification. Your breath, your awareness, those are all the pathways to reach that unification, that higher state of consciousness. And so cultivating that energy, whether sexual or otherwise, different pathways, same result. So you don't have to masturbate to reach there. Although I will say that if you have experienced sexual trauma, masturbation can be a really incredible tool that you can use, if that's something that you're interested in, to reclaiming your sexual power, or your comfort engaging in sexual behaviors because you set the boundaries. And you can do as little or as much as you want. You can take your time with the next step. Although I do always recommend, especially with such an intense experience as sexual trauma and being a survivor of that, that you reach out to a counselor or a therapist that can emotionally support you through that journey. So like I said before, or hinted at, yoga or meditation is a great way to harness that sexual or genital power by bringing awareness to the physical sensations of your body. It's all about being present, and I think that oftentimes people use sex or masturbation as a tool to be present in their bodies and feel themselves. It's an amazing experience for those who enjoy it, and it really brings you into that present moment because you're just feeling yourself, you're feeling those sensations. And so yoga and meditation is the perfect way to do that. I studied under a lama for quite some time, and I've taken on those tantric Buddhist practices, those internal practices that are considered secret practice. So I won't go into the detail of in what way we do them because I respect these practices. I do these practices. I will say that bringing that awareness, using that sexual energy, because it's a very strong energy, among the other energies that you carry, that loving energy, that compassionate energy. There's so many different energies in the world, and that's just physics, but it's all energy, right? So learning how to control that energy so that you can use it to better yourself, better the world, reach that higher state of consciousness that you seek, whether you seek it subconsciously or consciously, we're all reaching for something, right? That purpose of life, and many people are seeking that happiness, which on a path to reaching a higher state of consciousness, you realize is something that you cultivate within yourself, that contentment that everybody wants and kind of hankers for. So in terms of Tantric Buddhism, other branches of Buddhism, other religions, as well as in the yogic community and the tantric community, harnessing and controlling desires, which is brahmacharya. Some people consider it as chastity. That's not necessarily true. This is all desire. And that's not necessarily to say that you can't have these things. If you're married, it's considered faithfulness, not committing adultery. But having control over these desires so that you're not overindulging, you are consciously choosing what you allow yourself to receive and what you give. This reciprocal relationship, this karma that you're cultivating, the idea is to remain karmically free as much as possible. And so by controlling these desires and making conscious decisions, you're repatterning your brain to have this new sense of awareness that you can use for other things. And so when you masturbate or you reach orgasm, they say that you are leaking some of these energies from your second chakra, your Swadhisthana, which is inside of like your pelvic cavity region, all around where your hormones are. And so that's why it's considered to be the sexy chakra. So yeah, there's this whole thing about not leaking through there. There's actually people who practice sending that energy up through the crown of the head, and men who don't ejaculate, but they send that orgasmic energy up because they have such control. What most people don't realize is that for men, ejaculation and orgasm are actually two separate events. They just more often than not occur at the same time, basically. So having that control, understanding the difference between orgasm and ejaculation, those sensations, and being able to kind of pull apart and separate those events, those people are then able to orgasm and control what they do with that energy without ejaculating. So people who are like, oh yeah, I'm going to try that, I want to get into Tantra and blah, 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 which that's not what Tantra is. That's a tool within the yogic, tantric, Buddhist community, etc., etc., to reach a higher state of consciousness, but that's not what Tantra is. I'll explain that in a second. But basically, it can be quite dangerous, and everything can always be quite dangerous, but if you are unable to separate these two events and you don't have a guruji or some kind of supervisor, some mentor to help guide you in this, you can cause, men can cause what is called retrograde ejaculation, where instead of ejaculating out of the penis, the ejaculate goes inside of the bladder, causing severe bacterial and other infections that can cause a lot of damage to the body. So I don't recommend just trying it. You need to have the proper training, and it takes people years and years and years to develop that kind of craft and that ability, and it is for spiritual reasons. It is not for sexual performance. So if that's something you're interested in, then you need to seek the proper people and the proper pathway for spiritual enlightenment, in my opinion. So, moving on a little bit from that, a friend of mine recently asked me, he said, why does masturbation sometimes feel better than sex? And I think that is such a good question. Why does it? And a lot of that has to do with the fact that, like I said, you're setting your own boundaries. You know your body better than anyone else. You've been living with it for however many years you've been alive in this lifetime, and you've spent the most time with it. As a kid, you were probably touching yourself and not even realizing what you were doing until someone said, hey, don't do that in public. Or maybe you had a parent that said, don't do that at all. Who knows? But as kids, we play, we're curious, we want to know what our bodies are, and it's not necessarily a sexual thing. Later, during puberty, when we realize, whoa, my body does that, it becomes more of a sexual exploration. But before that, it's just a really intimate way of getting to know your body. And so, because you know your body better than anyone else, who's going to make you feel better? And there's no performance pressure, there's no sexual pressure. And so I think that is a really important separation to make there, is that when you're with someone else or with others, plural, there is that kind of, you are vulnerable. You're literally bare, spread out everything out in front of another human being. And what is the thing that we fear most as human beings? Rejection. I mean, maybe death, but in this case, rejection. And we are comfortable with ourselves because we're alone. But sometimes maybe if we don't accept ourselves and love ourselves 100%, we open up ourselves to that kind of criticism from others. And people can be quite mean. I mean, when you're growing up and you're feeling kind of like insecure about your bodies, like guys will say things about girls like, oh, she was so loose and blah, blah, blah. And girls will say things like, oh, yeah, like I broke up with him and he's he's not great in bed anyway, and he had a small wiener and whatever. But those things are really just to protect ourselves, right? And everyone has a different body, and I think that those habits as teenagers that we do out of insecurities about ourselves oftentimes, or feeling hurt by the situation or somebody else, we say things that kind of embed and subconsciously remain in the back of our heads, and that carries out through our adulthood. So when you're alone, all of that kind of washes away. I'm keeping everything anonymous to the people who write me. So there was another guy who once said to me, and it really, wow, it really hit me when they said this. They struggled with a sexual dysfunction, and they said to me, what we were trying to repattern their masturbation habits, to recondition the body, to become more sensitive to being able to ejaculate, because instead of premature ejaculation, they struggled with the opposite. And they just said, well, when I masturbate, I don't feel broken. And wow, such a raw comment to take in, and what a beautiful moment that they shared with me. And to know that for some people that's what masturbation is. It's a safe space. That's just so beautiful. And it gives you the opportunity to work on reconditioning if you have any kind of issues, in a non-judgmental space, in a safe space. So take care of yourselves, guys. If you're one of those people who does like to masturbate or anything like that, make sure you're recognizing the real beautiful and strong impact of that self-care, that self-love. Try to integrate that into your daily practice. I always say other people's opinions of me are not my business, and while I'm only human, you want to please your partner, but if you're with someone who's going to judge you and not want to connect with you in a sexual space, then maybe that's time for a discussion. So this is getting quite long, so I will actually be breaking this up, I think, looking at the time, into 2 separate videos. I'm going to record the next one right now for you so that you can watch them back to back, and I will be going over the sex toys or masturbation toys for you guys so that you can have this separate information for yourself. Thank you so much for tuning in to Let's Talk Masturbation Part 2. This turned out to be just a focus in the spirituality world. Before we do go, I forgot to mention Tantra. So really quickly, Tantra is about webbing of energies, and there's a large misconception there that Tantra is all about sex and having a lot of sex and a lot of group sex and polyamory and blah, blah, blah. And no. It's a webbing of energies, and while sexual energy is a really strong energy, one of the strongest that you can utilize to cultivate into reaching a higher state of consciousness, Tantra is about enjoying the journey and understanding more about yourself. It's about finding and shaping those boundaries that you have, whether conscious or subconscious, and finding new ways to push those boundaries, reaching new levels of comfort, and growing, learning more about yourself as a human being in this lifetime. So yeah, I just really quickly wanted to slide that in there while we were on the topic. But again, thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope you enjoyed it. If there's anything that you'd like to ask, anything that you'd like to see on this vlog, send me a message, or if you have any kind of comment or something that you'd like to share when I do announce the next what the next video will be, and you'd like to add in your 2 cents, I am always all ears. I love different perspectives. That's what the really beautiful thing is about sexology, is that everyone as individuals has their own sexuality, their own identity, their own likes, dislikes, and I'm just one person. So I love sharing other perspectives. I'll see you for part 2B or part 3, where we'll talk about sex toys just in a couple seconds. Namaste. Thank you so much.